Hey there, budgeteers. Are you ready to unlock the power of each payday and take control of your finances like a boss? Introducing the Payday Power Planner from New Money Habits. This isn't your average budgeting tool. Oh no. With the Payday Power Planner, you'll harness the unique rhythm of your paychecks to supercharge your financial game. Say goodbye to the confusion of monthly budgets and hello to the clarity of every payday. You'll know exactly when money is coming in and when it's going out, giving you the edge you need to stay on top of your finances. But that's not all. With the Payday Power Planner, you'll easily spot whether you're rocking a surplus or facing a deficit. Armed with this knowledge, you'll make informed decisions that set you up for financial success. It's time to transform your relationship with money and create the new money habits you need to achieve financial freedom. Get your hands on the Payday Power Planner from New Money Habits today and start making every dollar count. Don't let financial stress hold you back. Create a better plan for your money and seize the power of your pay period and thrive with the Payday Power Planner. Visit newmoneyhabits.com now to grab your free copy and unleash your financial potential. On this best of episode of the New Money Habits podcast, we're going to discuss how emotions affect the way you manage money. What's up, budgeteers, and welcome to the New Money Habits podcast. I'm your host and one of the co-founders of New Money Habits, Coach Nino Villa. And today on the New Money Habits podcast, our friend Sarah and I discuss how feelings like regret, boredom, anger, stress, fear, love, and relief can impact the way you manage your money. If you have any questions, be sure to hit us up on social at New Money Habits and follow us on your favorite podcast platform, or tell your smart speaker to play the latest episode of the New Money Habits podcast. If you want to help out the show, consider leaving a 5-star rating and review. We cannot thank you enough for those 5-star ratings and reviews. They truly help us to spread this message of hope to people looking for a better plan for their money. Now let's get into today's episode. Another closely related emotion to stress and to fear would be anger, but it is different. And I have a personal story about how anger affected a decision that I made that had a huge effect on our financial everything. So I may have shared on the podcast before, but I was working W-2 work in 2020, just as the pandemic hit. And the organization I was working for is one that I had worked for and with for a long time, had grown very kind of attached to this organization. These are all the things that I realized in hindsight. Like, I didn't know it at the time, but it's a place that had to let me go a couple of times, brought me back. And when they brought me back the last time, it was under very specific terms. It was that I was going to be in a very specific position in a very specific department within the organization with very specific influence on how that department was going to operate. Okay, so very specific terms. So the pandemic hits, and of course, like most organizations, first everybody started working from home. Then it was, well, now we got to resize the organization because we're just getting hit hard. And so there was a massive layoff. And I've been affected by 2 of their past layoffs brought back, and I had seen others. And so it wasn't the layoff, but during this period, it was, Nino, we value you so much that instead of eliminating your position and letting you go, we're eliminating your position, but we're going to move you to this other department in this other role, doing this other thing. And at first, I was like, okay, well, like at least I'm not losing my job. But something just didn't sit right. And all this information about like, no, Nino, you came back to this organization on your terms. It was to be in this particular role, in this particular department, with this particular amount of influence on how that department was going to run. And now you're in this completely different department. You have no influence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I got angry. I mean, furious, to the point that like my anxiety was out of control. I was taking mental health days. I actually was like, I need to take a short leave of absence. I took a 2-week leave of absence. I mean, I was so angry. And I did whatever I could. I started to go to a therapist. That's how, like, this shook me so much that I did what I could. But ultimately, after that 2-week leave of absence, I came back and I told my new boss, I said, no, I'm not going to accept this transfer. It's no reflection of you. It's about the organization, and you guys need to let me go. I'm like, what? Like, yeah, like I'm not quitting, but you need to let me go. And so I walked away from a $90,000 a year paying job because I was angry. Now, I'm a man of faith, and I didn't make that on a whim. I knew I had, like, God was going to take care of me in other ways. There was other income coming in, but my reason for sharing the amount is because I'm a blue collar kid from Buffalo, New York, who was the first to graduate high school in his immediate family, who never imagined he would ever work a white collar job that paid him 90 grand a year. And I was walking away from it because I was angry. So, anger, strong emotion that can lead to big financial decisions.
It can. And, that story is so powerful for so many reasons, right? But what I really love about it is that, what I really love about it is that you're sharing it, because how many times have others of us, had similar experiences. I've walked out of jobs because I was angry before, and no plan. I did not have a plan in place. Right. And it just goes to show how powerful emotions can be when, looking at our finances, and our financial decisions and our futures and everything else. And, I think it's important to note too, that not everything turns out to be negative, right? That there are some really positive things. However, when you get used to letting those emotions be the guide, for making those decisions, I think more often than not, things are not going to work out the way you want them to work out, right? And we don't learn how to really trust ourselves because we're letting those emotions come in. But that's a powerful story, Nino.
It's one of my favorite to tell for a slew of other reasons too, but it was a shocker. It was a shocker that when I look back at it, because I continued on, I'll go on this tangent for just a second, but I continued on with the therapy, and so many things came up about like how close I was to the people in the organization and how they became like family, and how there was like correlation of this decision to like my parents divorcing when I was 9 years old. Like there were like these connections that I didn't even realize. And that's why I felt so hurt and betrayed and I was so angry, is because decisions were being made for me, not with me. Had they come to me and said, look, this is what we need to do, and this is what we're thinking about doing. We're thinking about putting you over here. That would have been different. But decisions were being made for me, not with me. And that got me pretty riled up.
I bet. And I still feel some of that coming. There's still some there. I mean,
maybe a little.
yeah.
Hey there, budgeteers. You know, good news can only be good news if there's bad news. So, what's the bad news? The bad news is you and I have a deadly disease called sin, and this disease causes us to rebel and disobey God. See, God is holy, righteous, and just, and He cannot be in the presence of sin. So this horrible disease of ours separates us from the God who created us. And the bad news gets worse. There isn't anything you or I can do to make ourselves right with God. We are dead in our sins and on our way to an eternity separated from God. But that's not God's will for us. See, for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whoever believes in Him should not perish but have everlasting life. God did what only God could do. He made a way for us to be reconciled to Him through Jesus Christ. Jesus came into the world to save sinners like you and me. While we were still sinners, storing up God's anger against us for our rebellion and disobedience, Christ died for us. Jesus took the punishment that you and I deserve and have earned. Jesus is the substitute for your punishment and mine. Now, isn't that some good news? The word gospel means good news. The gospel of Jesus Christ is that you and I broke God's law and Jesus paid the fine. When we place our faith and trust in Jesus, we get to experience God's grace and mercy. Our gratitude should turn us from our rebellious and disobedient sin toward God, seeking after Him and His righteousness. When we do, God gives us a new heart and a new mind. Praise God for His goodness, and remember, God loves, humans sin, Jesus saves.
Right.
I want to shift to another emotion that's very closely related to stress. Oftentimes, stress can lead to fear. And fear can be, fear of the unknown. It could be fear of lots of things. I have a client story that's specific about fear of missing out, which is definitely something that this culture experiences a lot of nowadays. We all have FOMO, and I think that's more so true when we look at things like the housing market, or we look at like our retirement accounts, and it's like, man, I think I missed out on getting into the housing market when it was lower, or I missed out on this really interesting stock tip, or I missed out on the GameStop price hike thing a couple of years ago, or I missed out on cryptocurrency. Fear of missing out is something we're definitely dealing with. And so then people want to get involved in things, sometimes a little ahead of schedule, or just a little bit premature. And so I have a client who in the past has missed out on acquiring investment property. There had been either family situations or close, like relatives or whatever, where properties were being let go. He could have picked them up pretty much on the cheap. And so, he felt like he missed out. And so another opportunity came and he pulled the trigger. And here we are about 8 months, 12 months into that decision. And it's been a learning process. There's been ups and downs, and there's been frustration, and there's been excitement, and there's been just another array of emotions after the decision was made. We're going to take this opportunity because we've missed opportunities like it in the past, and we're not going to miss this one. We're just not. Okay, you're in a financial position where you can think it might be a little bit premature, but just understand that you're going to learn a lot, and education usually costs you, right? Whether you're paying tuition to a university or you're paying tuition to life, you're going to pay to learn this lesson. And so I just think it's less about their decision specifically and more about what drove their decision. And that is that fear of missing out. And I think that it affects a lot of us, that we get into a place, I know that 2, maybe 3 years ago, I got into the cryptocurrency market because it was kind of blowing up at that point. And at first I saw some impressive gains, but I'm a holder. I'm not into this whole day trading thing. So my fear of missing out got me to buy, and I saw some huge gains and I did not sell. And I still hold those assets today, and they're worth a fraction of what they were worth when I bought them. And so my fear of missing out caused me to act in one way, but apparently not act in the way that I would have actually made some money. Anyway, I digress. FOMO. It affects how you spend your money.
It definitely does. And, and I see that. I personally have never been like the FOMO type. I just, it's never been an emotion that has played a huge part for me. My husband, it played a part for him, for a while. We've worked through a lot of that now, but I see it with a lot of clients, and even, some of our friends, and people that we hang out with, you see the FOMO kind of creeping in, like, oh, everybody's got the new phone. I need to go and get the new phone. What am I, they talk it up. And so this, I think, these things are so common. So, any of you listeners, any of you guys are feeling this, don't feel, bad or, we're not coming down on you. I think part of this is just to share that this is so common. These emotions are so common for us, but we don't talk about them a lot. The FOMO has never been a huge thing for me, but fear has definitely played a part. And just yesterday, and this is a little bit different take on, how fear has shown up for me. But just yesterday, I was going through and doing tracking of our spending over the past couple weeks. We've been really busy. I did get behind in some of, our tracking. And as I'm writing down all the numbers, James and I have spent more in the past couple weeks and I'll label these air quote extra categories that we don't normally contribute to or we don't normally spend out of, right? And we have spent a lot more out of those categories than normal. And so this fear, we're just like, oh, crap, like we've spent so much money. And, then this fear, like, how are we going to pay for this? And what, how did this happen? And all of these things, and this scarcity, because I've talked a lot about my own scarcity when it comes to money, this comes up for me, like, what are we going to do? How are we going to, take care of this? And then I had to look and remind both of us that, part of us working the rally, the Sturgis rally, was so we specifically put money aside for these extra expenses. We specifically created, a little sinking fund because we knew that we wanted to make some of these purchases. But yesterday when I was tracking that, fear clicked in because it's one of my default emotions. Fear is just one of my default emotions. And that's what came up first, is like, man, oh man. But then I had to remind myself, and I got my sticky note here with it. I had to remind myself, Sarah, you guys saved for these purchases, right? So get rid of the fear. Fear has no place here. You saved specifically for these things. We saved $1,500 for these purchases. We spent $1,544. So we spent $44 more than what we had planned. I'm okay with that. But I really had to pull in the reminder of, like, fear doesn't have to be your first emotion here. You planned for this already, right? And I want to bring that up. So if you have these emotions, it's okay to remind yourself, hey, this doesn't have to be your default emotion, right? It doesn't have to be the one that guides, and you don't have to feel guilty for making those purchases. You planned for it. It's okay. Move on.
Yep. You should not feel guilty about planned for purchases, but when you kind of lose sight of I planned for this. I have money set aside for it. I get it. Hey there, budgeteers. Are you tired of feeling like your finances are running the show? Well, it's time to flip the script and take charge of your money with New Money Habits Financial Coaching. This isn't your typical financial advice. New Money Habits is about empowering you with the knowledge and tools you need to make savvy money moves and build a solid financial foundation. Here's the deal. We're offering a free discovery session to kickstart your journey to financial freedom. Yep, you heard me right. Free. In this session, one of our experienced coaches will help you to pinpoint your financial goals and create a better plan for your money. We're talking about mastering your money mindset, picking up practical money management skills, and having someone to hold you accountable along the way. So, if you're ready to kiss financial stress goodbye and say hello to a brighter financial future, then schedule your free session today to create the new money habits you need to achieve financial freedom. Yeah. I do have another one that's a little bit more specific around like the idea of heartache. And so I'm going to tread really lightly with this story because I don't want to divulge too much of the information. Although our listeners don't know who this person is, it's still just the details. The details of this story are really, really tough. But let's just put it this way. I was working with a couple, primarily almost exclusively with the wife of the couple. Husband was on board, but was kind of like traveling a lot and doing all this other stuff. And it was like, I don't necessarily want to sit down every other week and do this. You guys figure it out. Tell me what's happening and I'll just go. And so working with this couple, eventually come to find out that their daughter needs inpatient care for some very traumatic stuff. And so in this wake of heartache and disbelief and I mean, part of that was also like anger and a bunch of other, I mean, sometimes these emotions are not a singular emotion, right? They're a flood of different emotions, but at the root of this one was devastation and heartache. My client couldn't see a way that to get her daughter the treatment she needed without taking out a home equity loan or line of credit. And just being able to walk her through that and actually show her like, no, actually with the assets that you have and with the surplus that you have and all these different things, like tell me about like how much is it going to cost? And I'm like, okay, with these programs here and a little bit of funding coming from there, I'm like, actually, you guys can afford to just cash flow this. It just means a little bit less of a surplus. It means not hitting these other financial goals, but this now has become the priority. We're going to put these other things on the back burner. And the amount of relief, she had enough stress in her life that to not have to worry about this and to not have to go further into debt to take care of it really freed her up to focus on supporting her daughter to the best of her ability without being constantly worried about how are we going to get her the help that she needs. And it's like, I'm like getting misty-eyed just recalling this scenario, because to help somebody experience that much relief where now their focus could be where their focus needed to be, which is on their child and not on their finances, it's humbling.
Yeah. Wow. That's a really powerful story. And I think it just goes to show how important having that second opinion really is, because when we're letting the emotions and we're so deep in this, in the emotion, how many emotions, right? All of them, especially it sounds like, that situation where having somebody else there that can walk us through that so that we're not putting ourselves into another situation, that's maybe not equally, but certainly frustrating and and puts us in, brings up a whole lot of other emotions, right? And so having somebody to just walk us through it and say, no, here's actually what you can do. You're helping them relieve stress. And, you were there to help them take a breath, even if it was a small breath. That breath was, I know, and I don't know this couple, but I know how much of a relief that really gave to them to take that little bit off their plate, right? That their focus, as you said, was on their daughter, and they didn't need to worry about these other pieces. And how important is that during a really stressful, probably stress and anger and heartache and loss and all of it. And love plays a huge role in all of that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That, it was quite a trying time. But they got the help that they needed. And, all these years later, things are much, much different. Speaking of love, I have a personal story about love that starts off a little bit playfully, and then not that it gets serious, but it gets a little serious. So I think about different emotions and how they drive our financial decisions, right? And so when my wife and I fell in love and decided we were going to get married, there's going to be a cost to that, right? And so interestingly enough, I was the one that wanted the big, big wedding. She was all like, let's keep it low key. Like, there's no need to do all that. And so, we started down this process of like planning a wedding. And then I remember that the next emotion that kind of affected this particular series of events was annoyance, and not with my wife, but with my mother. So that inevitable call of, hey, Mom, your boy's getting married. And she's all like, oh, yay, that's so fun, blah, 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 blah. Now, make sure you invite this person and this person and this person and this person, and make sure that these people are invited. And I'm like, whoa, hold on. I haven't talked to half of those people in decades. These people are not active people in my life at this point. Like why would I, what are you talking about? So I got annoyed, but it was just the right amount of annoyance for me to then get on the same page with my wife, who was all like, can we just keep it simple? And can we just keep it small? And I was all like, simple and small sound great. So we saved ourselves a fortune on our wedding because we kept it small and we kept it simple. And in fact, I think we aggravated a lot of people in our social circle. But at the end of the day, my wife and I decided and realized our wedding is about our union, our commitment to one another under the sanctity of God's provision. And we're like, you know what? That's right there. That's enough for us. We don't need all this other shagala and shenanigans and tomfoolery and bamboozlements and every other synonym you can come up with for crazy. So we kept it small. We kept it simple, and it was great.
I love that. And I laughed through your whole story because I find myself like recalling, when James and I got married, and you just know, like, and how many people have, as clients we've helped walk through this process that have experienced very similar emotions, right? And certainly the annoyance is probably top one. Let's just be honest here. And I love it because, it really is, love is an emotion, right? And there's a lot of other stories I'm sure that we could bring in that aren't nearly as humorous as yours. But love is it's a very powerful emotion that does fuel a lot of our decisions, and it's worth bringing up so people are aware of it, so, I'm more aware of it and our listeners are more aware of it.
Yeah. And actually, let me give our listeners a real practical, for instance, around like love and how that emotion affects us almost on an annual basis. So when you don't plan for the holiday season, like Christmas or even somebody's like birthday or an anniversary, and you kind of wait until the last minute, your love for that person starts to drive some weird sense of guilt of like, oh, but I got to show this person how much I love them. And so I know for me and for a lot of my clients, and just I've witnessed this over and over and over again. If we wait and procrastinate, all of a sudden we overcompensate. And we spend more than we would spend, or we buy more than we would have originally purchased. And it just kind of gets weird. And so very early on in the episode, you had talked about like how to kind of combat some of this, or how to neutralize the emotion. And one of the ways to neutralize any guilt or anything that comes as a result of how much you love somebody and you want to make sure that they know it, is the further ahead you plan for these things, the less emotion and the more just kind of net neutral. It doesn't mean you don't love the person. It just means you're not being completely controlled by guilt, not love, but guilt that comes with, but I love them so much. And so the more the further ahead you plan for a birthday, Christmas, those types of things, the more you can kind of just be more thoughtful and mindful and sensitive to your own budget and spending habits to say, hey, if I got, like, I remember one year I got my mother like a portfolio for work. She's a licensed psychotherapist, so just like had her name on it and her the initials behind it, whatever. It didn't cost a lot, and she was over the moon about this gift. But I know that in other years, I waited till like the last minute. And so it was all like, I got her this and I got her that and I got her this and I got her that. And she's like, what is all this crap? Right? Like, and why did you get me this crap? So take time, be more have more foresight around planning for those things.
Yeah. And I love that because truthfully, putting more meaning and more emotion behind it, which is, kind of what we're talking about. When you put, more meaning and more emotion behind the gifts instead for the other person, right? And you're pulling your own emotion out of it, right? Like these feelings of guilt and I want to try and prove something, right? So when you change where that emotion, how it affects, you take it away from you and put it more on them, like what are you trying to create in their life? That's a great example of how emotion plays a big part, but you're putting it for them, right? You're getting them a meaningful gift that doesn't have to cost a lot of money, but you are keeping yourself accountable to. If our friends and family, and this is going to be a side note, but if our friends and family really, if they knew how we were letting emotion drive, some of our financial decisions, they wouldn't want that for us, right?
Yeah.
If they knew that some of these emotions were driving our financial decisions that were creating more negative impacts in our life, they wouldn't want that for us. They wouldn't want to be the receiver of anything, right? Of any gift that put us in a negative financial position. And so, it's that planning ahead. It's that foresight. It's that how is the emotion affecting here? And how can I make this gift great for them that doesn't put me in a negative place financially. And I think it's great talking about emotions and money. This has been really fun, honestly, and it's opened my eyes to some other areas, right? And I think it probably did for our listeners too, kind of giving people a second thought of how emotions play such a huge role in our lives.
Absolutely. And I want to kind of wrap things up with an emotion that would actually hopefully come from like the scenario we just mapped out, where like if you're being more thoughtful about gift giving and if you're actually thinking about how the other person wouldn't want you to be in a bad position because of a gift that you gave them, there's an emotion that comes with great foresight and planning called relief. And I think you have one final story to share with us about how relief might, that feeling and emotion can affect the way that we manage our money.
Yeah, and I think, sometimes we think relief is going to help us, and it's going to be really positive, we're like, oh, thank goodness this is happening. For example, I had some clients that refinanced their home, and they had this tremendous amount of relief, like, oh, we're going to refinance, we're doing a cash out so we can then take care of, some of our other debt. And that relief that's what was fueling their decision making, right? Like, we need to get rid of this other debt. We're just going to refinance our home. It's going to be so much better. We've got one payment. We don't have all of this other debt to have to worry about. And using that emotion to fuel that decision, it lasted for a very short period of time, Nino, because what they hadn't done is they hadn't addressed the fact that they were overspending every month. They were spending far more than what their income allowed for. They were spending more than what income they had. And so they were living outside of their means. And so that relief that they were so longing for, right, and so hoping for, it was very short-lived because they went right back into debt because they hadn't addressed the behaviors, right, that fueled the debt in the first place. And so when you use relief as your emotion, right, to make a decision, if you're not, again, getting that second opinion, you're not really looking at everything involved, maybe that relief is leading you in a direction that isn't as positive as you think it might be.
I appreciate you bringing up that point too, because we want relief to be a result, a true result of making better financial decisions in a net neutral emotional state, but not one that is fueling. Because I think that when we use relief to kind of fuel, it's almost like fool's gold. There's this promise that's going to go unfulfilled, but we would rather you experience relief in your finances because you're managing them in a much more healthy way. That does it for this episode of the New Money Habits Podcast. Remember, if you have any questions, make sure to hit us up on social at New Money Habits and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please consider leaving a 5-star rating and review to help us spread this message of hope to people looking for a better plan for their money.